So with that, let's get started because we do have a full agenda. As I mentioned, 4 years ago, HR committees definitely in the spotlight. Compensation was a key issue, but increasingly there was the piece on the development, the talent, and the strategy. And now there looks like there's some even more interesting and pressing developments. And perhaps with that stage setting, I'll turn it over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Don. It's great to be back, and as you may recall, we predicted in 2011 a shift from CEO succession and executive compensation with increased emphasis on leadership development and leadership bench strength. And it's hard to pick up any article today where that is not something that people are writing about. Today I'm going to talk about what is going to happen and how that's going to evolve in the future, and I'm going to predict two more things that are going to be on the minds of the HR committee of the board going forward. The reason for that is when you look at what's happening in the world and you look at what's happening in Canada around competitiveness, technology, and how that's disrupting businesses. If you look at Canada as a country, we dropped another spot this year in global competitiveness. Lowest that we've been at number 15 since 2006. There's a lot of reasons why we need to be thinking about our talent agenda and the HR committee's oversight of that agenda. So let's start with talent and leadership. So many organizations, small, medium, and large, have paid attention to development of leaders and building a pipeline. And you know, that is proving out in many studies that are being done around the financial impact. Companies that have strong leadership development practices are performing at a rate of 13 times better than companies that don't have strong leadership development practices in metrics that matter, like product innovation, financial performance, employee engagement. So it's having a bottom line impact. Another study that was recently released that was produced over a decade looked at companies, their leadership development and how they were preparing leaders for the future. The companies that sat in the top 15% of that study grew their market capitalization by 122% compared to the bottom 15% that grew their market cap by 37%. So there's a business reason why this matters to a business and the board and the HR committee of the board. So what's going to be different and how's that going to shift? Well, not only are boards and HR committees going to have to continue to think about executive compensation and CEO succession and the leadership pipeline, they actually need to have a line of sight deeper into an organization, into the middle management and the critical roles because of all the workforce demographics and the changes that are coming to our workforce. So if you're sitting on the HR committee of a board, whether you're a small, medium, or large organization, you need to be thinking about not only the top jobs, but the middle management in the organization. And as you complete CEO succession, the succession plan for the CEO's next successor starts day one. So thinking about that CEO's legacy and their succession going forward needs to begin first day on the job. The second area that I want to touch on is diversity and inclusion. There's been a lot talked about in this space, and there is now a shift from diversity and counting numbers to inclusion. And the reason for inclusion is bringing diversity of thought to the workforce. And the reason that that matters is when you look at the workforce demographics in Canada, it is predicted by 2031 that 1 in 3 of the labor force in Canada will be foreign-born. You couple that with the fact that some of the organizations today are actually looking at their employee base and their leadership base and matching that to their aspirations around customer and the geographic markets that they operate in. And then finally, regulation is coming, and it's here in Canada. When you think about the US, the regulators there are looking at the selection of directors, the process that was followed. If you look in Europe, at France is one particular example. In 2010, they passed legislation that by 2013 they wanted 20% of their directors to be female, and then by 2016 they wanted that number at 40%. You bring that back to Canada, we need to be thinking about how our director mix matches our business strategy and aspirations, both from a female representation, but also from the geographies that you operate in and the customers that you're trying to attract. There's two new trends I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. Technology disruption. You're seeing a lot about this, you're hearing a lot about it, and it is accelerating and changing business rapidly. Why does this matter to Canadian companies? Well, Canada invests at a rate of 53% of what the US invests in technology development. What's more is that we're also falling behind in productivity. We've dropped 11% since the 80s. Finally, when we look at real estate and the occupancy in real estate, so people sitting in their offices, 60 to 70% of the real estate is sitting empty. You combine all of those factors with our competitiveness, there's a reason to be questioning what should the workforce look like in the future? How should we design our real estate in order to meet the workforce demands, the demographic changes, and what jobs will disappear in the future? In fact, Singularity University is predicting that 80% of blue-collar and white-collar work that's performed today will actually disappear through automation and analytics. So think about how many jobs today that you're looking for and trying to fill that didn't exist 5 years ago. That is going to accelerate at an exponential rate. So what does this mean for organizations? Well, there were 1 billion mobile workers in 2010. This year it's predicted to be 1.3. There's 50 billion mobile devices. Employees can work anywhere, anytime. And so as you think about looking at the strategy of an organization, and the HR committee of the board needs to be asking the question, what is the future of the workforce? What is the nature of the work that needs to be performed? And what is the best way to deploy the expensive assets of real estate and people in order to execute against that business strategy? The last area that I want to talk about is really about the HR function. This one is a bit controversial because I would say, and I'd go as far as saying, that HR requires an extreme makeover in Canada. And the reason for that is if you look over the last number of decades, HR is still performing largely the same work. Employee relations, hiring, learning. And so in the future, a lot of that work needs to be automated and self-serve. Why is that? Well, when you talk to business executives, 30% of the business executives globally would say that they get expert advice from their HR executives. What's even more shocking is that only 5% would say that they have excellent performance in HR. This is a great opportunity for HR to modernize and rethink the services that they're offering and how do they enable the business. So what does this mean to boards, and what should HR committees of the board be asking? They need to be asking, how is HR responding to the business strategy and the aspirations of business? How are they going to change the programs and the support they offer to modernize and actually enable the business through the people and the leadership? So finally, if I was going to close all of these thoughts, many of you are probably sitting there, if you're sitting on a board, and saying this is just more oversight and more governance. Really what it is about is getting different insights into the HR programs and the risks that you have in your business as an HR committee of the board. You'll miss something big if you are not thinking about the impact that technology will have on your business and your strategy, and the impact that that's going to have on your workforce and where your workforce chooses to do the work that they need to do on your behalf. You will miss something if you're not thinking about your leadership pipeline down into middle management when you think about the aging workforce and the demographic changes that are coming. You will miss something if you don't have inclusion of thought when you're thinking about product development and you're trying to compete in this new reality that we're in. And finally, you need to ask your HR function to modernize in order to respond to the changes that are here and that will continue to come. Thanks very much, Don.